Joining me now to take us through the papers is Alison Sargent. Hello, Alison. We're starting in Japan, of course, with the historic abdication of Emperor Akihito.
That's right. It is literally the end of an era in Japan today, and we can start by taking a look at one of the country's oldest papers, the Mainichi Shinbun. They talk about this changeover of the emperors as a new wind for the country, and in an editorial they say it's important not only to celebrate the imperial succession, but also to consider how imperial celebrations should change with modern ideas. And they specifically reference the ceremony that will actually be taking place on Wednesday when Akihito's son Naruhito will take the throne. And there's a part of that ceremony that women from the royal family are not going to be able to attend. The New York Times is also pointing this out in an article today. The paper says it really illustrates the diminished status of women in the imperial family. Women can't take the throne, and their children can't be part of the line of succession either. Because of this, the paper says the imperial family is really in danger of becoming extinct, although they note that the Japanese government has said that they plan to reopen that debate about female succession as soon as Naruhito ascends the throne on Wednesday.
Next, reactions to the Islamic State group releasing a video the terror group says is of its leader.
That's right. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is back on the front pages today after this video was released, his first alleged appearance in 5 years. The last time was when he announced the creation of this so-called caliphate back in 2014. Papers are noting that this appearance comes just weeks after the IS group was ousted from Baghouz, its very last stronghold in Syria. This video is widely being interpreted as a way for Baghdadi to both recognize defeat and prove that he's still alive. The Italian journalist Daniele Ranieri, who covers the Islamic State group, writes that it's also a way for him to reaffirm his status and role as a leader, because he says Baghdadi was facing a revolt from within his own ranks as the group was losing all of its territory. Meanwhile, one writer for The Independent warns not to be psyched out by Baghdadi's return. Yes, his reappearance does have a big shock effect, but that doesn't mean he's a threat. This writer says Baghdadi remains a bad strategist whose extreme violence only creates more enemies than he can ultimately defeat.
Now, Alison, today the New York Times is reporting on Syrian refugees harvesting hazelnuts in Turkey.
That's right. This is an interesting story making the front page of the New York Times today. 70% of the world's hazelnuts come from Turkey. They're produced on thousands of tiny farms there. And the New York Times reports that thousands of Syrian refugees have been recruited to harvest these hazelnuts. The paper says it's an incredibly dangerous job since the hills where the trees are so steep. It's also an incredibly thankless job. Most of these workers work 7 days a week for the equivalent of only $10 a day. These farms are supplying hazelnuts to major companies like Nestle and Ferrero, whose products many of us consume. So along with the destructive production of palm oil, it's just one more reason to maybe reconsider a Nutella habit.
Now you have another, if I can put it this way, refugee story, but a happier one, with the first Muslim model to be featured in the US magazine Sports Illustrated in a swimsuit with her hijab.
That's right, Claire, and in some of the photos, she's even wearing a burkini. Her name is Halima Aden. She's a Somali American. She was born in a refugee camp in Kenya, and so the magazine actually decided to bring her back to Kenya for this photo shoot. She's already been on the cover of Vogue and walked the runway at New York Fashion Week. The magazine Sports Illustrated says that she proves here that there's a place for modest Muslim women in the fashion industry.
Turning our attention to Norway, fishermen there are reporting that they've unmasked a Russian spy. It's a beluga whale.
That's right. This is a pretty ridiculous story. These fishermen say that they were being repeatedly harassed by this beluga whale, and then they noticed that it was wearing a harness, as you can see in this photo here. When they took the harness off, they found that it said "Equipment of St. Petersburg" on it. Now, the somewhat sensationalist conclusion from many papers, like the Daily Mirror, is that this whale is, of course, a Russian spy. They said the harness could be used to carry a camera or even a weapon. Meanwhile, the HuffPost mentions a 2017 report by a Russian TV station that said Russia had started training belugas, bottlenose dolphins, and even seals to play various military roles. They reportedly found at the time the belugas were too sensitive to the Arctic cold and not as professional as the seals, so it's possible that this beluga is actually just a reject of the Russian military.
Now, I watched Game of Thrones last night. Don't know about you, Alison, but always fun to watch. And apparently, a lot of people are inspired by the show for their baby names.
They are. I actually have not gotten to watch it yet. I'm waiting till Wednesday. No spoilers. Yeah, and it turns out Arya is the most popular of those baby names, especially after this last episode, or so I've heard. There are also babies out there, though, named Daenerys or even Cersei. It's mostly a trend for girl babies who are named after the show's more powerful female characters. That baby you see pictured there is named Khaleesi, which means queen in the made-up language Dothraki. In 2017, it turns out there were more Khaleesi's born in the US than there were Britneys.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Alison, for taking us through the papers. And if you want to find out more about what the papers are saying, make sure, of course, you check out our website, France24.com.